Genesis 1:2, the third part. So far in our reading, we've seen how the black letters of Targum Pseudo-Jonathan, so to speak, are a literalistic translation from Hebrew, whereas the red is insertion. It seems pretty obvious, though, that this late Jewish literary Aramaic document is aware, however, of Targum Onkelos, and we'll see how here in a moment. Here we have tohu vavohu rendered in Aramaic. Now, Targum Onkelos had used these words for tohu vavohu, which are different. But notice in Pseudo-Jonathan, both of these words also appear in the inserted material. Interesting, right? It's not exactly the same, but for the separation of a few centuries, the similarity is striking. Now, here's another characteristic of late Jewish literary Aramaic as opposed to Jewish literary Aramaic. We notice the word for face, which we had seen in a couple of places, and now the difference in Pseudo-Jonathan. There's a noon in there. This is because late Jewish literary Aramaic often prefers noonation to represent gemination. That's just a quick way of saying a noon in a place where you would have expected a dagesh before. Also, here's another similarity, min kodam. We see that in the inserted material in Pseudo-Jonathan. And finally, this is noon sheen bait as a verbal root, and we already said we had noon tav bait of the equivalent term in Pseudo-Jonathan. Now notice that connection. Up here we have sheen, down here we have tav. This is the consonant alteration we had seen in Biblical Aramaic for Biblical Interpreters, page 3, between Hebrew and Aramaic, where Aramaic would often have the tav, which in this case we see in Pseudo-Jonathan, in places where Hebrew would have a sheen. So altogether we have a complex literary relationship as well as a very natural development linguistically from Jewish literary Aramaic to late Jewish literary Aramaic, and it's right in front of our eyes here in Genesis 1:2.